The gunshots split the air like thunder, freezing Theodora Blackburn in her tracks as she stepped off the stagecoach into the dusty street of Silverpine, Colorado. It was 1878, and she'd traveled all the way from Boston to this frontier town with nothing but 2 trunks and a teaching certificate. Her heart hammered against her ribs as men scattered, ducking behind water troughs and barrels while women pulled children to safety. "Welcome to Silverpine, miss," drawled the stagecoach driver, tossing down her trunks with practiced ease, seemingly unperturbed by the commotion. "Town's lively today." Theodora stood paralyzed, her dove-gray traveling dress already gathering dust as another shot rang out. Then came the thunder of hoofbeats as a rider burst from between 2 buildings, a man with a determined set to his jaw and a gun in his hand. "Stop right there, Johnson," he called out, voice carrying over the sudden quiet that had fallen. Theodora barely had time to register what was happening when the rider's eyes locked with hers. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. Then his expression changed to alarm. "Down," he shouted, spurring his horse toward her. Before she could react, strong arms swept her off her feet as the cowboy leaned from his saddle, pulling her against his chest and away from the street just as more gunfire erupted where she had been standing. "Let me go this instant," she demanded, struggling against his grip as they rounded the corner of the general store. The man set her down behind a water trough, his eyes startlingly blue beneath the brim of his hat scanning the street. "Pardon the handling, madam, but I just saved your life. Might want to stay put until I settle this." Before she could protest, he was gone, leaving her crouched in the dirt with her heart racing and indignation rising. Her first 5 minutes in Silverpine, and she'd been swept off her feet literally by a gun-toting cowboy. This was decidedly not how her new life was supposed to begin. 20 minutes later, with the commotion settled, Theodora found herself in Mayor Whitman's office, her trunks deposited outside on the boardwalk. The mayor, a portly man with mutton-chop sideburns and a perpetually sweaty forehead, mopped his brow with a handkerchief. "Terribly sorry about your welcome, Miss Blackburn. Silverpine is usually much more civilized." He glanced nervously at the tall figure leaning against the doorframe. The cowboy who'd manhandled her off the street stood watching, hat in hand now, revealing hair the color of sun-bleached wheat. His face was weathered but young, perhaps 30, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble. "May I present Deputy Marshal Thomas Irwin," the mayor said. "He's been tracking that rustler for 3 days. Fortunate he arrived when he did. Pleased to meet you properly, Miss Blackburn." The deputy's voice was lower and more cultured than she'd expected. "Again, I apologize for the rough handling. I'm alive to be offended, so I suppose I should thank you, Marshal Irwin," Theodora replied stiffly. A slight smile touched his lips. "Deputy will do, madam." "Miss Blackburn is our new schoolteacher," Mayor Whitman interjected. "Came all the way from Boston to educate our children." Deputy Irwin's gaze sharpened with interest. "That's so? Brave journey for a lady alone." "I assure you, Deputy, I am quite capable of managing myself," Theodora replied, brushing dust from her skirts. "When not being shot at or abducted by lawmen, that is." This drew a genuine chuckle from him. "I'll keep that in mind, Miss Blackburn." He settled his hat back on his head. "Mayor, I'll get Johnson locked up and send a telegram to the county seat." After he left, the mayor escorted Theodora to the small house that came with her teaching position. It sat on the edge of town, a modest white clapboard structure with a small porch and neat yard. Inside was simple but clean: a parlor, kitchen, single bedroom, and an attached privy that was a luxury by frontier standards. "School starts Monday," the mayor informed her, setting down her smaller trunk. 23 students ranging from 5 to 16. The last teacher left rather abruptly when her husband struck gold in the mountains. He chuckled. "Doubt that'll happen to you, being unmarried and all." "Indeed not," Theodora replied, already surveying what would be her home for the foreseeable future. "Thank you for the escort, Mayor. I believe I can manage from here." Once alone, she sank onto the narrow bed, suddenly overwhelmed. At 24, she'd left everything familiar behind: her widowed mother, her friends, the culture and comfort of Boston, all to escape the suffocating expectations that had nearly trapped her in a loveless marriage. Teaching in a frontier town had seemed adventurous in theory. Now, with gunshots still echoing in her memory and the dust of the journey coating her clothes, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. But Theodora Blackburn was not one to surrender to doubt. She rose, unpacked her books, first her most precious possessions, and began to make the small house her own. The schoolhouse stood at the north end of town, a sturdy building of weathered boards with tall windows and a bell tower. By Sunday evening, Theodora had arranged the classroom to her satisfaction, polishing the ancient blackboard and organizing readers and chalk. She'd spent Saturday introducing herself to townspeople, memorizing students' names from school records, and avoiding the curious stares that followed her down the boardwalk. She'd seen no sign of Deputy Irwin since their encounter in the mayor's office, though she'd heard he'd successfully delivered his prisoner to the county seat and returned. Not that she was looking for him, she assured herself. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. Theodora, dressed with care in a high-necked navy dress, pinned her light brown hair in a sensible chignon, and arrived at the schoolhouse an hour early. She wrote a welcome message on the blackboard, arranged her desk, and waited with nervous anticipation as the first students began to arrive. By 9 o'clock, 21 children occupied the benches, ranging from tiny Sarah Miller with her missing front teeth to lanky James Fletcher, nearly a man at 16 and clearly unhappy about being in school. Theodora had just begun her welcome speech when the door opened, and Deputy Irwin stepped in, holding the hands of two small, solemn-faced children. "Pardon the interruption, Miss Blackburn," he said, removing his hat. "These are the Harper twins, Emma and Elijah. Their pa was delayed bringing them in from their homestead." The children, perhaps 7 years old with matching mops of dark curls and wary expressions, clutched small slates to their chests. "Thank you, Deputy," Theodora said, coming forward to greet them. "Children, I'm Miss Blackburn, your teacher. You may take seats right up front here." The twins glanced up at the deputy, who gave them an encouraging nod. "Miss Blackburn is real smart," he told them quietly. "Come all the way from Boston to teach you. You mind her well, you hear?" "Yes, sir," they replied in unison, then scurried to the empty bench Theodora indicated. Deputy Irwin caught her eye, tipped his hat with the barest hint of a smile, and left, boots echoing on the wooden floor. That evening, exhausted but satisfied with her first day, Theodora was preparing a simple supper when a knock sounded at her door. Opening it cautiously, she found Deputy Irwin standing on her porch, hat in hand. "Evening, Miss Blackburn. Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Deputy," she acknowledged, surprised. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all. Mayor asked me to bring you this." He held out a small paper-wrapped package. "Town's welcome gift for the new teacher." "It's a tradition." Theodora accepted it, unwrapping the paper to reveal a small brass bell. "How thoughtful." "For your desk," he explained. "Previous teacher took hers when she left. Please thank the mayor for me. Would you care for some tea, Deputy? I was just about to have supper." The invitation surprised her as much as him, judging by the momentary widening of his eyes. "Thank you, but I wouldn't want to impose," he replied, though something in his expression suggested he might have accepted under different circumstances. "Another time, perhaps," she said politely. He nodded, settling his hat back on his head. "Town socials coming up Saturday week," he said. "Dance at the meeting hall to celebrate Founding Day. Good chance for you to meet more folks." "A dance?" Theodora felt a twinge of anxiety. "I'm not much for dancing, I'm afraid." "No." His head tilted slightly. "Thought all Boston ladies would be accomplished dancers." My education focused more on books than ballrooms, Deputy, she replied, a touch defensively. He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. Well, don't worry. Silverpine dances ain't exactly fancy affairs. He tipped his hat again. Good night, Miss Blackburn. Theodora watched him stride away down the darkening street before closing her door. She placed the little bell on her desk, running a finger over its smooth surface. A dance. She'd managed to avoid most such events in Boston, using studies or headaches as excuses. Here, as the new schoolteacher, she'd be expected to attend. The thought filled her with dread. The first week of school passed in a blur of lessons, children's names, and adjusting to life in Silverpine. Theodora found herself settling into a routine, taking meals at the boarding house when she didn't feel like cooking, attending church on Sunday where she met more townspeople, and gradually feeling less like an outsider. Her students were mostly eager to learn, though James Fletcher remained sullen and the Harper twins painfully shy. She'd learned they lived with their father on a small ranch outside town, their mother having died in childbirth 2 years earlier. She'd seen Deputy Irwin around town, always with a polite nod when they passed on the boardwalk. Once he'd stopped by the schoolhouse at day's end to fix a broken window latch, working efficiently while she organized books. They'd spoken little, but the silence hadn't felt uncomfortable. As the town social approached, Theodora's anxiety grew. She found herself lingering after church to speak with Mrs. Peterson, the minister's wife, a kind woman in her 50s who had welcomed Theodora warmly. "I'm afraid I'm not much of a dancer," Theodora admitted as they walked slowly from the church. "I never had occasion to learn properly." Mrs. Peterson patted her arm. "Don't fret, dear. Half the men in this town have 2 left feet anyway. No one will notice if you simply stand on the sidelines." Somehow, that wasn't comforting. Saturday arrived, and Theodora, dressed with care in her best gown, a deep green silk with modest lace trim, saved from her Boston life. She arranged her hair in a softer style than her usual severe chignon, allowing a few curls to frame her face. The meeting hall was transformed with lanterns and bunting, tables laden with food brought by townspeople, and a small group of musicians tuning instruments in the corner. Almost everyone in Silverpine seemed to be there, from elders to children racing between adults' legs. Theodora accepted a cup of punch from Mayor Whitman and stationed herself along the wall, smiling politely as parents of her students came to chat. The music started, and couples took to the floor for a lively reel. "Not dancing, Miss Blackburn?" The familiar voice beside her made her start slightly. Deputy Irwin stood there, transformed from his usual practical attire. He wore a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and polished boots, his wheat-colored hair combed neatly. Without his hat, he looked younger, his blue eyes more striking. "As I mentioned, Deputy, I don't dance," she replied, watching the whirling couples with a mix of envy and apprehension. "Everyone can dance," he countered. "Just takes the right partner." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering to be that partner?" A slow smile spread across his face. "I might be, if you're willing to risk your toes." Before she could respond, little Emma Harper appeared at the deputy's side, tugging his sleeve. "Deputy Irwin, Pennsylvania says to tell you he's fixed that fence like you asked." Thomas Irwin crouched down to the child's level. "Thank you kindly, Emma. Is your pa here tonight?" The girl nodded, pointing to a tall, bearded man standing awkwardly by the refreshment table. "He don't dance neither. Says he forgot how after Mama died." A shadow crossed the deputy's face. "Well, sometimes folks need reminding of things they used to enjoy." He straightened. "Miss Blackburn, this is a fine opportunity. Perhaps we could both learn something new tonight." The music changed to a slower waltz, and Thomas extended his hand to her. "One dance," he said softly. "If you truly dislike it, I promise not to ask again." Something in his expression, earnest yet challenging, made refusal impossible. Theodora placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her to the edge of the dance floor. "I should warn you," she murmured. "I truly have no idea what I'm doing." "First secret of dancing," he replied, placing his hand respectfully at her waist while holding her other hand, "is trusting your partner." When she hesitated, looking down at their feet with trepidation, he said gently, "Here, I'll show you a trick my mother taught me." To her surprise, he guided her to stand on the tops of his boots. "Deputy," she protested, feeling childish and exposed. "Just for a moment," he assured her. "Feel the rhythm first." With her standing on his boots, he began to move, guiding her through the steps of the waltz while supporting her weight. Around them, a few people smiled indulgently, but most were focused on their own dancing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, he counted quietly. "See? Not so difficult." After a minute, when she'd begun to feel the pattern, he gently helped her step off his boots. "Now on your own," he encouraged, still holding her firmly. "I won't let you fall." Theodora stumbled once, then again, but his steady presence kept her upright, his hand warm at her waist. Gradually, her steps aligned with his, and they were truly dancing, moving in slow circles at the edge of the floor. "I'm dancing," she whispered, a smile breaking across her face. "You're a natural, Miss Blackburn," Thomas replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Just needed the right start." When the music ended, Theodora felt strangely disappointed. She stepped back, smoothing her skirts, suddenly aware of how close they'd been. "Thank you, Deputy," she said formally. "That was instructive." A knowing look crossed his face. "Instructive enough for another dance later?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Perhaps." The evening continued with more dancing. Theodora partnered with the mayor, the blacksmith, and even young James Fletcher's father, gaining confidence with each turn around the floor. But she found herself watching for Thomas, noting how he danced with elderly Mrs. Simmons as respectfully as with the giggling Cooper sisters, how he organized games for the children, how his laugh carried across the room. Later, as promised, he claimed her for another dance, this time a livelier tune that had them linking arms and changing partners. When they came back together, both slightly breathless, he said, "Told you that you could dance." "I said I couldn't dance, not that I wouldn't learn," she corrected him, flushed with exertion and pleasure. "There's a difference?" "Of course. One implies inability, the other choice." He chuckled. "You talk like a teacher even when you're dancing. And you dance remarkably well for a deputy marshal," she countered. "Where did you learn?" A shadow crossed his face. "My mother insisted. Said a gentleman should know how to dance." Before she could inquire further, the music ended, and Mrs. Peterson approached to ask Theodora about Monday's scripture lesson. When she looked back, Thomas had moved across the room to speak with the Harper twins' father. The evening wound down, families with young children departing first. Theodora helped clean up, stacking plates and folding tablecloths alongside other women. As she prepared to leave, Thomas appeared at her side. "May I walk you home, Miss Blackburn? It's dark out." "Thank you, but I'm quite capable," she began automatically, then stopped herself. "Actually, yes, that would be kind." They walked in companionable silence through the quiet streets, the autumn night cool but pleasant. Outside her door, Theodora turned to him. "I enjoyed this evening more than I expected," she admitted. "Thank you for the dancing lesson." Thomas smiled. "My pleasure. Perhaps next time you'll try a reel." "Don't press your luck, Deputy," she replied with mock sternness. He laughed, then hesitated, seeming to debate something internally. "Miss Blackburn, Theodora, if I may, I wonder if you might consider joining me for dinner sometime. The hotel restaurant serves a decent meal on Sundays." The invitation surprised her, though perhaps it shouldn't have. There had been something building between them these past weeks, something she'd been studiously ignoring. "As friends," he added quickly when she didn't immediately respond. I thought you might appreciate conversation that doesn't revolve around children's lessons or town gossip. Yes, she found herself saying. I'd like that. His smile widened. Sunday, then? After church. Sunday, she agreed. He tipped his hat and waited until she was safely inside before walking away. Theodora leaned against her closed door, heart beating oddly fast. What was she doing? She'd come to Silverpine to escape the constraints of Boston society, to build an independent life focused on her teaching not to be courted by a deputy marshal with dancing skills and kind eyes. And yet, as she readied for bed, she found herself humming the waltz they'd danced, her feet remembering the steps he'd taught her. Sunday dinner became a weekly tradition. They'd emerge from church, nodding politely to townspeople, and walk together to the Silverpine Hotel, where the dining rooms served the town's finest meals. Over roast beef or chicken, they discovered common interests. Both loved reading, though Thomas preferred history, while Theodora favored poetry. He told her of growing up in Missouri, the son of a judge who'd expected him to follow in his footsteps until the war changed everything. She spoke of her sheltered Boston upbringing and her desire to make a difference through education. Why Silverpine, he asked once. Surely there were teaching positions closer to home. Theodora hesitated, then decided on honesty. I was engaged, she admitted, to a banker's son, a suitable match by all accounts. But when the time came for the wedding, I couldn't do it. She traced the rim of her water glass. I didn't love him. And I realized I would rather face the unknown alone than security without love. Thomas nodded slowly. Brave choice. My mother called it foolish, Theodora said wryly. Perhaps she was right, but here I am. Here you are, he echoed, his expression warm. Teaching our children and dancing on deputies' boots. She laughed, grateful for his lightening of the mood. What about you? What brought you to Silverpine? The war, he said simply. After Appomattox, I couldn't go home. Too many ghosts. Drifted west, worked as a ranch hand, then a scout. Sheriff in Wyoming Territory deputized me to help track a gang of rustlers. He shrugged. Found I had a knack for the work. When Marshal Davis here needed a deputy 5 years ago, I took the badge. And you've been here ever since. It's a good town, he said. Good people. First place that's felt like home in a long time. As autumn deepened into winter, their Sunday dinners continued. Occasionally Thomas would stop by the schoolhouse with some small excuse, a book he thought she might enjoy, news about a student's family, and offered to repair a loose floorboard. Sometimes he brought the Harper twins with him, the children gradually warming to Theodora and showing remarkable aptitude for reading. One bitterly cold December afternoon, as she was preparing to leave the schoolhouse, a blizzard swept down from the mountains with startling speed, turning the world white within minutes. Theodora stared out at the blinding snow, wondering if she could make it to her house, when the door burst open and Thomas appeared, snow coating his shoulders and hat. Thought you might still be here, he said, stamping his boots. Storm came on faster than anyone expected. Not safe to be out in this. I was just realizing that, she replied, eyeing the whiteout conditions with dismay. Thomas crossed to the pot-bellied stove in the corner and added more wood. Better stay put until it passes. I brought provisions, just in case. He produced a package wrapped in butcher paper and a canteen from inside his coat. You came out in this to bring me food? Theodora asked, torn between exasperation and gratitude. Wasn't this bad when I started? He defended himself. Besides, couldn't have our teacher freezing or starving, could we? They settled in, sharing the sandwiches and coffee he'd brought while the storm raged outside. As darkness fell, Thomas lit the lamps and stoked the fire higher. Looks like we might be here a while, he observed, peering out at the undiminished blizzard. Theodora tried not to think about the impropriety of the situation. At least it's warm. To pass the time, Thomas suggested she teach him some of the games she used with her students. They played word puzzles and geography quizzes until both were laughing at their competitive streaks. "You'd have made a fine student, Deputy," Theodora declared after he successfully recited all the state capitals. "Had a good teacher once," he replied, stoking the fire again. "Old man named Abernathy back in Missouri. Made learning seem important, even to a restless boy like me." "Is that why you help the Harper children so much?" she asked. "I've noticed how you bring them books, check on their progress." Thomas was silent for a moment. "Their situation reminds me of my own, I suppose. Lost my mother when I was 8. Father did his best, but some things a boy needs to learn from others." Without thinking, Theodora reached across and squeezed his hand. "You're making a difference in their lives. I see it every day in class." His eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. Then he stood abruptly, moving to check the windows. "Storm's easing a bit. Should be able to get you home soon." The moment broken, Theodora busied herself gathering her things, conscious of a strange disappointment. When Thomas finally deemed it safe enough to venture out, they trudged through knee-deep snow to her house, his arms supporting her against the wind. At her door, he made sure her stove was lit and promised to check on her in the morning. As he turned to leave, Theodora impulsively caught his arm. "Thank you, Thomas," she said softly, using his given name for the first time. "For coming to find me." He looked down at her, snowflakes melting on his eyelashes. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he gently touched her cheek. "Always, Theodora," he said simply, then disappeared into the swirling white. The blizzard marked a turning point. Something had shifted between them during those hours in the schoolhouse, a recognition of feelings that went beyond friendship. Yet both seemed hesitant to acknowledge it directly, continuing their Sunday dinners and casual conversations with a new undercurrent of awareness. Christmas approached, bringing preparations for the school pageant and a festive atmosphere to Silverpine. Theodora threw herself into rehearsals with her students, determined to give the town a performance to remember. Thomas helped build the simple stage in the meeting hall and patiently coached the Harper twins through their lines when they froze with stage fright during rehearsals. The pageant was a success, with even sullen James Fletcher earning applause for his surprisingly good rendition of the Christmas story. Afterward, amid the punch and cookies, Thomas presented Theodora with a small package wrapped in brown paper and red ribbon. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Christmas comes but once a year, Miss Blackburn," he replied with mock formality. "Even schoolteachers deserve gifts." Inside was a delicate silver bookmark engraved with a rose. "It's beautiful," she breathed, touching it reverently. "Noticed your books always have folded corners," he explained, looking slightly embarrassed. "Thought this might save their dignity." Theodora had a gift for him, as well a fine leather journal she'd ordered from Denver. "For your thoughts," she said as he ran his fingers over the cover. "Or case notes. Or whatever deputy marshals write about." Their eyes met over the gifts, something warm and unspoken passing between them. The moment was broken when Mayor Whitman called for everyone's attention to thank the schoolteacher for her efforts. Winter settled into a rhythm of school days, Sunday dinners, and occasional gatherings at the meeting hall where Thomas would inevitably persuade Theodora to dance, at least once. January brought another blizzard, this one trapping most of the town at home for 3 days. When it cleared, Thomas appeared at Theodora's door with a shovel to clear her walkway and firewood to replenish her depleted supply. "Not necessary," she protested, though grateful. "I could have managed." "I know you could," he replied, eyes twinkling. "But why should you when there's help available?" February brought influenza to Silverpine. Theodora closed the school when half her students fell ill, instead traveling between homes to deliver lessons and help care for sick children. She found Thomas doing the same, bringing medicine from the doctor to outlying farms and checking on elderly residents. They often crossed paths during these rounds, sharing news of who needed what, working together without need for discussion. When Theodora herself succumbed to the illness, it was Thomas who appeared at her door with chicken soup and medicines, sitting by her bed reading aloud from Dickens until she fell into exhausted sleep. As she recovered, a realization grew within her. She was falling in love with Thomas Irwin. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She'd come to Silverpine to escape the constraints of a loveless marriage, to build an independent life. Yet here she was, her heart given to a man who hadn't even kissed her. Spring arrived, the snow retreating to reveal muddy streets, and the first green shoots pushing through thawed earth. With it came plans for Silverpine's Spring Festival, a tradition Mayor Whitman described as even bigger than Founding Day. There'll be competitions, food stalls, games for the children, Mrs. Peterson explained to Theodora after church one Sunday. And, of course, the dance in the evening. Much more elaborate than our usual socials. People come from all the surrounding homesteads. Sounds wonderful, Theodora replied, though privately wondering if she could convince Thomas to escort her formally rather than their usual casual arrangement of meeting there. That opportunity came the following week when Thomas stopped by the schoolhouse after lessons ended. He looked uncharacteristically nervous, pacing between desks while she organized papers. "Spring festival's coming up," he said finally. "So I've heard. Mrs. Peterson has already drafted me to help with the children's games." "I was wondering," he stopped, cleared his throat. "That is, I thought perhaps you might allow me to escort you. Properly." Theodora looked up, trying to hide her pleasure. "As opposed to improper escorting?" He chuckled, relaxing slightly. "As your official escort for the entire day, not just appearing mysteriously at your side during the dancing portion of the evening." "I see," she said, pretending to consider. "And what would such an arrangement entail?" "Fetching you at your home, accompanying you throughout the festivities, ensuring you enjoy every moment." He stepped closer. "Perhaps a private supper before the dance." The intensity in his blue eyes made her heart quicken. "That sounds lovely, Deputy Irwin." "Thomas," he corrected softly. "Thomas," she agreed, suddenly breathless. The day of the spring festival dawned bright and clear. Theodora dressed with special care in a new blue dress she'd ordered from Denver, with a fitted bodice and fuller skirt than her usual teaching attire. She pinned her hair in a softer style, allowing curls to frame her face, and even dabbed a tiny bit of rose water behind her ears. Thomas arrived promptly, looking handsome in a crisp white shirt, polished boots, and a new black vest. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, presenting them with a formal bow that made her laugh. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his admiration evident. The festival transformed Silverpine's main street into a riot of color and activity. Bunting hung between buildings, stalls offered everything from apple pies to handcrafted goods, and children raced about with painted faces. Thomas kept his word, staying by Theodora's side throughout the day, his hand occasionally touching the small of her back as they navigated the crowds. They cheered for James Fletcher when he won the shooting competition, applauded the Harper twins' recitation in the children's showcase, and laughed together at the pie-eating contest that left the blacksmith's apprentice with blueberry filling covering his face. As promised, Thomas led her away from the festivities as evening approached, guiding her to a spot by the creek just outside town where he'd arranged a picnic supper. A blanket lay spread beneath a cottonwood tree, a basket waiting with fried chicken, biscuits, and a bottle of cider. "This is lovely," Theodora said, settling on the blanket. "Though I suspect Mrs. Anderson's hand in the food preparation." "Guilty," Thomas admitted, sitting beside her. "My cooking skills are limited to coffee and beans." They ate leisurely, talking about the day's events, watching the sunset paint the western sky in gold and crimson. As Thomas gathered the remains of their meal, a comfortable silence fell between them. "I never expected this," Theodora said finally, trailing her fingers through the soft grass. "The picnic?" "Silverpine. Teaching." You. She looked up at him. When I left Boston, I thought I was running away from something. I never considered I might be running toward something better. Thomas's expression softened. He moved closer, taking her hand. Theodora, he began, then seemed to struggle for words. These past months, getting to know you, you've become very important to me. Her heart quickened. And you to me. I'm not a man of fancy words, he continued, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. But I want you to know my intentions. I care for you deeply. More than I thought possible after he broke off. After what? She prompted gently. Thomas sighed. I was married once, before the war. Her name was Sarah. She died in childbirth while I was fighting at Shiloh. Our daughter with her. Theodora squeezed his hand, understanding now his particular concern for the Harper twins. I'm so sorry. For years after, I couldn't imagine feeling anything again, he continued. Didn't want to. Then you stepped off that stagecoach, looking so proper and Boston-like, right into the middle of a gunfight. A smile touched his lips at the memory, and something woke up inside me. He reached up, gently touching her cheek. I know you came here for independence, to build your own life. I respect that. But I hope, perhaps, there might be room in that life for me. Theodora's breath caught. Are you courting me, Deputy Irwin? With your permission, Miss Blackburn, he replied, a hint of mischief in his eyes despite the seriousness of the moment. Instead of answering with words, Theodora leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a gentle, tentative kiss. Thomas responded immediately, one hand moving to cradle her face as he deepened the kiss with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally drew apart, both slightly breathless, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. I take it that's a yes? Theodora laughed softly. Yes, Thomas. That's a yes. The evening dance had a different quality now, an electricity that hadn't been there before. They moved among the townspeople, accepting congratulations from those who noticed their linked hands and exchanged glances, dancing together with a new awareness of each other. Remember our first dance? Thomas asked as they waltzed beneath lantern light, his hand warm against her waist. When you stood on my boots? And claimed I would never learn to dance, Theodora recalled. You proved me wrong. You proved yourself wrong, he corrected. I just provided the opportunity. As spring mellowed into summer, their courtship became the talk of Silverpine. Thomas began taking supper at Theodora's house several evenings a week, sometimes bringing the Harper twins, who had become almost surrogate children to them both. On Saturdays, they often rode to nearby beauty spots for picnics or fishing, Thomas patiently teaching Theodora to handle a horse with confidence. Their first disagreement came in July, when Thomas was called away to track a band of rustlers operating in the territory. He expected to be gone for several weeks, possibly longer. I don't understand why you must go, Theodora argued, pacing her small parlor. Surely the territorial marshal has other deputies. I have the most experience with this particular gang, Thomas explained, watching her with concern. And a duty to fulfill. A duty that could get you killed. She shot back, then immediately regretted her sharpness.
I'm sorry.
I know it's your job. I just worry. Thomas crossed to her, taking her hands. I'll be careful, and I'll come back to you. I promise. Their farewell was bittersweet, a lingering kiss on her porch as dawn broke. Theodora watched him ride away, a figure silhouetted against the rising sun, and felt a hollowness in her chest that surprised her with its intensity. The weeks of his absence dragged endlessly. Theodora threw herself into summer lessons and preparations for the fall term, but evenings were lonely without his visits. She found herself checking the horizon whenever a rider approached town, heart leaping then falling when it wasn't Thomas. August brought scorching heat and dust storms that left everything coated in fine grit. Theodora was helping the Harper twins with their reading one evening when hoofbeats approached her house. She looked up, hope flaring, then rushed to the door as Thomas dismounted from a trail-worn horse, his face sunburned and stubbled but gloriously, wonderfully intact. She flew down the steps without regard for propriety, throwing herself into his arms. He caught her with a laugh that turned into a groan of pain, and she pulled back in alarm to see a bandage peeking from beneath his shirt. "It's nothing," he assured her. "Bullet just grazed me. Doc already patched it up at the way station." "Thomas Irwin, you promised to be careful," she scolded, though her hands were gentle as they cupped his face. "I was," he protested. "You should see the other fellow." The Harper twins had appeared on the porch, faces lighting up at the sight of the deputy. "Did you catch the bad men?" Elijah asked excitedly. "We sure did," Thomas confirmed. "All locked up safe in territorial prison now." Later, after the children had gone home and Thomas had bathed away the trail dust, they sat together on Theodora's porch swing, his arm around her shoulders as the cooler evening air brought relief from the day's heat. "I missed you," he murmured into her hair. "Thought about you every night under the stars." "I missed you too," she replied, nestling closer. "More than I expected. It seems I've become quite dependent on your company, Deputy." He chuckled. Dangerous admission for an independent Boston lady. "Terribly dangerous," she agreed. "Though perhaps not as dangerous as falling in love with you." Thomas stilled beside her. It was the first time either had spoken the word aloud, though it had been evident in their actions for months. "And have you," he asked quietly, "fallen in love with me?" Theodora turned to face him, summoning her courage. "Yes, Thomas. Completely and utterly." The joy that transformed his face was worth any vulnerability the admission cost her. "Well, that's fortunate," he said, voice rough with emotion, "because I've been in love with you since you stood on my boots and claimed you'd never learn to dance." He kissed her then, a kiss that held promise and passion and a future neither had dared imagine when they'd first met. The following Sunday, after church, Thomas suggested a ride to Buffalo Ridge, a scenic overlook a few miles from town. It was a perfect late summer day, wildflowers nodding in the breeze as their horses climbed the gentle slope to the ridge top. There, Silverpine spread below them, a tiny collection of buildings nestled in the valley. Thomas helped Theodora from her horse, then led her to a fallen log where they could sit and enjoy the view. He seemed unusually quiet, almost nervous. "Is something wrong?" she asked finally. "Your wound isn't troubling you?" He shook his head, taking her hand. "Theodora, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Meeting you, coming to know you, loving you. It's been a gift I never expected." She smiled, squeezing his fingers. "For me as well." "When I was away," he continued, "I had a lot of time to think under those stars. About what matters most." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I realized I don't want to spend another night away from you, if I can help it." Theodora's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small diamond. "It's not fancy," he said apologetically. "Nothing like what you might have had in Boston. But it's perfect," she whispered, eyes filling with tears. Thomas slid from the log to one knee before her, holding the ring up. "Theodora Blackburn, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love and cherish you all the days of my life, to dance with you whenever you wish, and to never make you stand on my boots again unless you ask." Laughing through her tears, Theodora nodded. "Yes, Thomas. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms, kissing her with a joy that felt boundless as the blue sky above them. They were married in October, when the aspen trees turned gold against the mountainsides and the air carried the first hint of winter. The entire town attended the ceremony in the small church, Theodora in a cream-colored silk dress ordered from Denver, Thomas resplendent in a new black suit. The Harper twins stood proudly beside them, Emma holding Theodora's bouquet during the vows, Elijah presenting the rings with solemn importance. Mayor Whitman hosted the reception at the meeting hall, transformed with autumn flowers and ribbons. The dancing continued late into the night, with the new Mrs. Irwin demonstrating considerably more skill than she had at her first Silverpine social. "Look at you," Thomas murmured as they waltzed. "Dancing like you've done it all your life." "I had an excellent teacher," she replied, her hand warm in his. "Though I seem to recall claiming I would never learn." He laughed, pulling her closer than propriety strictly allowed. "I've discovered you're remarkably adaptable, Mrs. Irwin, for all your stubborn declarations. And you're remarkably persistent, Mr. Irwin, for all your quiet manner." She leaned up to whisper in his ear, "Take me home, husband. I believe we have more important matters to attend to than dancing." Their home was Thomas's house, larger than Theodora's teacher's cottage, and set on the edge of town with a small barn and corral for their horses. They'd spent the weeks before the wedding combining their possessions, Theodora's books finding places of honor on shelves Thomas had built specifically for them. That night, as moonlight filtered through curtains neither had thought to close, they discovered each other with tenderness and passion that left them both breathless. Afterward, Theodora rested her head on Thomas's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Happy?" he asked softly, stroking her hair. "Completely," she replied. "Though I never imagined when I stepped off that stagecoach that I'd end up here, like this. With a gun-toting cowboy who taught you to dance?" She laughed. "With a man I love more than I thought possible to love anyone." Life settled into new rhythms. Theodora continued teaching, now as Mrs. Irwin, while Thomas fulfilled his duties as Deputy Marshal. They worked together to help Daniel Harper with his children, often having the twins stay with them when their father needed to travel for supplies or cattle sales. In spring, when Theodora discovered she was expecting a child, Thomas's joy was tempered with fear, remembering his first wife's fate. Theodora held him close when he finally confessed his terror. "I can't lose you," he whispered against her hair. "Not you too." "You won't," she promised, guiding his hand to rest on her still flat stomach. "We're stronger than fear, Thomas. This child is our future, not our past." As her pregnancy progressed, Thomas became even more protective, arranging for a young woman to assist in the schoolroom and insisting on accompanying Theodora wherever she went. She tolerated his hovering with good humor, recognizing it came from love. The Harper twins were delighted about the baby, asking endless questions and offering to help when the little one arrived. Even James Fletcher, now working as the blacksmith's apprentice, constructed a beautiful rocking cradle as a gift, his surly teenage demeanor softening when he presented it to his former teacher. In December, as snow blanketed Silverpine once again, Sarah Elizabeth Irwin came into the world after a difficult but ultimately successful labor. Thomas, who had paced outside until the doctor finally allowed him in, wept unashamedly when he held his daughter for the first time. "She's perfect," he murmured, gazing down at the tiny face with a tuft of light brown hair. "Just like her mother." "I was thinking she looks like you," Theodora replied tiredly, reaching to touch his arm. "Especially around the eyes." "Poor child," Thomas joked, though his voice caught. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "I never thought I'd have this chance again. A family." Theodora smiled, exhausted but radiantly happy. "Neither did I. Though for different reasons." As Sarah grew from infant to toddler, the Irwins' house filled with laughter and the inevitable chaos of family life. Thomas proved to be a devoted father, spending every free moment with his daughter, teaching her to ride on his shoulders and building her a tiny rocking horse that became her favorite possession. In the evenings, after Sarah was asleep, Thomas and Theodora often sat on their porch swing, talking about the day or simply enjoying the peaceful quiet together. Sometimes, If the night was clear, Thomas would fetch the small music box he'd given Theodora for her birthday, and they would dance slowly beneath the stars, her head resting against his shoulder. "Remember when you said you'd never learn to dance?" he asked her one such evening, 3 years into their marriage. "I was a fool," she admitted with a smile. "Though you were quite persuasive with your boot trick." "Best idea I ever had," Thomas replied, twirling her gently. "Got me a dancing partner for life." "Is that all I am to you, Deputy Owen?" "A dancing partner?" she teased. He pulled her close, his blue eyes reflecting starlight. "You're everything to me, Theodora. The woman who stood on my boots, then learned to dance beside me. The mother of my child. The love of my life." She kissed him then, beneath the vast Colorado sky, grateful for stagecoaches and gunfights and stubborn deputies who knew just how to teach a Boston schoolteacher to dance. When Sarah turned 5 and started school with her mother as her teacher, Daniel Harper approached Thomas and Theodora with a proposition. His health was failing, and he worried about his children's future. Would the Owens consider formally adopting Emma and Elijah, now 12, who already spent more time at their house than at the Harper homestead? The decision was easy. The twins had been part of their family in all but name for years. The adoption was finalized just before Christmas, giving Daniel peace of mind in his final months. "Think we can handle 3 children?" Thomas asked Theodora the night after the adoption was complete, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom. She laughed softly. "We already do, my love. Now it's just official." "True enough." His hand found hers beneath the covers. "Did you ever imagine your life would turn out this way? When you were teaching those Boston children about the wild frontier?" "Never," she admitted. "I came west looking for independence, remember? Not a husband. Certainly not 3 children." "Regrets?" he asked, and though his tone was light, she heard the genuine question beneath. Theodora propped herself up on one elbow to look at him, her face serious in the moonlight filtering through the window. "Not a single one, Thomas Irwin. The life we've built together is better than any dream I could have had. Even with all the dust and cowboys and lack of proper Boston culture," he teased. "Especially with those things," she replied, settling back against his chest. "Though I still maintain the cultural standards of Silverpine have improved dramatically since a certain schoolteacher arrived." "No argument there," Thomas murmured, drawing her closer. "That schoolteacher improved everything she touched, especially one dusty deputy who never thought he'd love again." Years passed, bringing changes to Silverpine and to the Irwin family. The railroad finally reached the town, bringing new prosperity and growth. Emma, showing a remarkable aptitude for numbers, became the assistant to Mr. Peterson at the bank, while Elijah followed Thomas into law enforcement, becoming a territorial deputy himself. Sarah, with her mother's intelligence and her father's steady character, announced her intention to become a doctor, a declaration met with full support from her proud parents. Thomas eventually became the town marshal when old Marshal Davis retired, a position he fulfilled with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. Theodora continued teaching until the school grew large enough to require multiple teachers, at which point she became the head teacher, overseeing the education of a new generation of Silverpine children. They celebrated their 20th anniversary with a party at their expanded home, now boasting a proper library for Theodora's ever-growing collection of books and a workshop where Thomas crafted furniture in his spare time. The entire town attended, toasting the couple who had become pillars of the community. Late that evening, after the guests had departed and their grown children had gone to their own homes or rooms, Thomas took Theodora's hand and led her to the parlor. He wound the old music box, its tune slightly tinny with age, but still recognizable as the waltz they'd first danced to all those years ago. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Irwin?" he asked with formal courtesy, though his eyes twinkled with the same mischief she'd fallen in love with. "I'm not sure I remember how," she replied, playing along. It's been some time since I last danced. Thomas smiled, holding out his arms. Stand on my boots, then. I'll remind you. Laughing, Theodora stepped onto his boots, just as she had that first night. Though they were both older now, silver threading through Thomas's wheat-colored hair, fine lines at the corners of Theodora's eyes, they moved together with the ease of long partnership, a dance perfected through years of love and life shared. I'm glad you proved me wrong, Theodora said softly as they swayed. About never learning to dance. I'm glad you let me try, Thomas replied, holding her close. Best gamble I ever took, putting a Boston schoolteacher's feet on my boots. Outside, snow began to fall gently on Silverpine, but inside the Irwin home, warmth and music wrapped around the couple as they danced, remembering the past and celebrating the future that had begun with a simple declaration, I'll never learn to dance, and a cowboy determined to prove otherwise.